Sarah, would you like to start us off? Just introduction and what your goal is and whether or not you have a norm or an expectation you'd like us to work toward?
Sarah Malish, Chair of the Manchester Finance Committee. I think that what's important from the Finance Committee side is that it comes to an agreement on both town supporting an operating budget that supports the existing programs. We're not cutting back on the programs, and that we're also taking into consideration the cost of the Essex Elementary School and how that's impacting the budgets. But I think that the Manchester FinCom is, if Essex can't support an operating budget, then we have concerns about an additional cost of another school. So.
Do you have a norm and expectation you'd like to put on data? Okay.
I'm Ann Harrison. I'm chair of the Manchester Select Board. I would first like to see what a budget that does not use reserves for operating would look like. And my goals, like to protect the program. But my norm is that the operations budget will be covered by revenue and not other revenue and not by taking money from reserves.
Thank you, Ann. Pam?
I don't know if it is technically a norm or an expectation, just hope we can come up with a flow chart for in timeline for information requests, mainly because we will do a lot of scheduling over the summer and our years are tight. So large requests with short turnaround times. We have a lot of competing pressures. So just getting some clarity around how we're going to do that and what the big topics or areas of discovery might be this year.
And do you have a goal that you'd like to articulate?
No.
Okay. Chris?
I'm Chris Reed. I'm the school committee chair. I'm not sure if I have any expectations for this meeting. I think getting together and discussing budgets is almost always a valuable use of everyone's time. I think I've shared this with probably everyone maybe at this table at one point in time, but my approach to, my role in the school committee is I try to take into account all three of our major stakeholders, which is our students, our teachers, our employees, and then our taxpayer base across both towns. And then I try to make the best decisions taking into account the needs of all three of our stakeholders. I feel like I've always done that as part of my role in the school committee, and I'll continue to try to do that to the best of my ability. That's very broad, so the devil's always in the details, right? But that's my main expectation. And then my role on the school committee is to probably put the students just a bit above our other two stakeholders.
And do you have a norm or expectation you'd like to propose?
We're kind of just beginning, so.
Okay. Oh.
Hi, Alvin Gahara, so Board of Selectmen Chair, had been on the school committee for 9 years. And I'm hearing maintaining the existing program, which is fine, but it could also be audited so that we have a way of saving some money. I'm a little bit nervous, looking at the projections from last year, of looking at possibly an override for Essex every year, and I don't think there's an appetite for that, but we would see. So my goal is hopefully that we have a good collaboration. It can't be about the poor Essex people. It has to be about, we are a district, and students come first says to me that everything the student asks for or the parent asks for they get, and that's a little bit hard for me to swallow. Giving everything to somebody, regardless of whether it's a school or a town, isn't feasible. So there's gotta be balance, and that's my, I guess if I had to pick one word, we have to find a way to balance it, or we're gonna have an ugly situation, and I didn't like what I saw last year, and hopefully it's not the same this year.
Brendan?
Brendan Zubricki, Town Administrator, Essex. I'm here to support, I support the Board of Selectmen, the Finance Committee. I don't develop the goals, they develop the goals. One thing that I talked about with Pam and with Greg is we need to just get an update on where the school lease between Manchester and the district stands, so that we can do whatever you need to do with it and get the proper thing in place. That's all I've got for now.
And do you have a norm or an expectation you'd like to, I don't, okay?
Jody Harris, Chair of the Finance Committee. I think, again, looking at the projections that we were provided last year for the school budget, it clearly puts Essex in override territory for the foreseeable future. I think that's a concern for our taxpayers. I do want to say that our ability to pay for the operating budget is very different than our ability to pay for the capital budget, and that the Finance Committee is working on projections and projects that are upcoming in Essex so that we can better model out what's happening and where we'll have room in our debt schedule, because Essex Elementary School is extremely important to taxpayers in Essex. Was one of the pillars of regionalization, and I think that getting past that or to that project will be important for taxpayers and their satisfaction. I want to provide a education in our public schools that meets people's expectations, but also allows both towns to afford that without having to put extreme pressure on our tax base.
And do you have a norm or expectation you'd like to?
My expectations really are more data-driven. I think we've always been data-driven from the Finance Committee perspective. So I know we've had some asks. We're going to have some follow-up asks that will turn around very quickly, Pam, so that we can get those. I think getting the data on the table for the Finance Committee and others takes away a lot of the questions, assumptions. I don't like people to have assumptions. I'd rather have the data to present to them and say, this is exactly what this program looks like. This is, the definition of the program. This is the number of employees that we have. This is the number of students. And this is what these class sizes look like. And when you put that out there, people make their decisions. Is that what they value, or is that what they want to pay for? And it makes it easier to make recommendations.
All right, and I'll say, my goal here is really to try to think about what a 3 to 5 year budget plan looks like. I think we've all been a little bit frustrated with the year to year nature of what we're doing, and in a way that accounts for town and school planning. And particularly trying to identify when we are likely, or what is a strategy for triggering override requests in one or both towns. So my goal or assumption, I hope that we can all assume positive intentions from each other, and ask clarifications about that if needed. And hopefully we can avoid I think what some people would articulate is like gotcha moves, right? Hopefully we can avoid that and really try to understand what we're driving at rather than make assumptions. You get a sense of where we are here? Okay, great.
To the wrong place. So I'm in a somewhat awkward position because I'm a short timer here, so. I'll be passing the baton to Tony Barletta, to be my successor. Tony couldn't make it today, maybe she could, but we'll certainly be participating going forward. Yeah, I would strongly advocate for working towards the multi-year financing efforts. Um, Indicated before that I think looking at smaller multiple overrides might be an approach that might be more sellable. If you have a strong multi-year financing plan. And I also think coupling the school construction project in Essex with what's happening on the operating side is a smart strategy to think about. So.
Great. The other thing I was asking is if you have a norm or an expectation you think would help our group work together.
Yeah, I think the obvious one is just being respectful and open and honest with each other. And I think everyone understands exhibits that, so.
Great, thank you.
When does that transition officially happen, or is there like a transition period, or?
So we're transitioning now.
Okay, well, yeah,
His official start date is July 1.
July 1, okay. So.
So I turned into the pumpkin.
Okay. But so the transition's happening now, and then you'll pretty much be done by July 1st?
Yeah, certainly available.
Okay. As a
Depending,
consultant?
yeah, for the month of July, no charge. If there are given needs beyond that, then I'm open and willing to not charge these over.
Sounds good.
And,
Not
and
a budget.
and just for transparency on our side too, school committee is not reorganized in terms of subcommittees. So whether or not it's Chris and me continuing, we still have to determine what our finance subcommittee looks like, or whatever we call it, our subcommittee here is doing this.
Yeah, we haven't done subcommittee assignments yet. We've just done, at our final meeting, we did vote for the chair for this year and the vice chair. So, and we did, we're staying consistent with that. So I'm going to be staying chair for this coming year, and Kate will be staying the vice chair for this current year. But we haven't done subcommittee assignments yet. So.
All right, so I think one thing we want to walk out of here knowing, and for partly to Pam's point, we want to know what we should be preparing for and or helping to set up. So if there are key questions or topics that we need to be thinking about, we'd like to know what those are. Obviously, we have a sense of them from last conversations we've had, from the data requests that we've received. We have a sense of those, but I think it would really help to know kind of priorities. What are kind of key, given the big picture, right? What are some key things we really need to work through together to understand better? So I'm not sure if it would be helpful to go around the room again or just put them on the table as you see fit. So I'll leave that open here.
I have a question. So the data request asked about the program and how that's dictated, and we did get some information back on that. But it doesn't actually go into exactly how many different types of courses you should offer, how often you should offer them, et cetera. Where does that get set up is one of the questions I have. We don't need to answer it today, but you go from kind of a general, this is the game plan for education, to, okay, this is what we're actually doing, and what connects it in between, and how are those decisions made?
So what I hear you asking for, Brendan, is a better understanding, some way to get at a better understanding of what is the program, right? We have these pretty big documents that are like elementary program, and it's hard if you're not in it, it's hard to understand kind of what that means.
So you have the general, and then you have the specific, which is what happens in the school every day. There's these courses being offered. How often is it every other year? Is it every year? Is it more than once in a school day? All of that. How do you get from generally what the guiding documents say to what has actually been chosen?
The experience of.
Yes. And I don't know, because I think there's got to be something in the middle, right, to get from there to there, but maybe it's just the choice of the administration. I don't know. I mean, something we can talk about.
No, again, we're not gonna try to answer these today,
Right.
Can I
but clarifying is good, yeah.
Is it what's required of us to offer to our program or our program to our operation?
No, I'm pretty sure, I'm very sure that you meet what you're required to do as a public school. I'm not asking that at all. I'm saying there are general guiding documents about how each grade or each section is going to operate. And then there's what's actually happening in the school. Because the guiding document doesn't say you will offer this course and that course. Generally, like US history, we all know that. But when it gets down to electives, when it gets down to AP courses, et cetera, how is that slate of things chosen? I don't know. The data request gave us a general idea of what is expected out of the educational program. But it doesn't map exactly how that sets up in the class day, right? So it's a question I have.
To schedule.
And Brendan, can I ask, how does knowing that level of detail help from kind of the fiscal planning? Just in terms of how you're framing.
Because I think the people who asked the questions, it was the selectmen and the finance committee, wanted to get to a level of detail that was finer than what we got. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
Understood, but I'm just trying to connect it since we are a kind of financial planning kind of group. I just want to make sure that I understand how that informs the fiscal
I'm
picture.
gonna leave that for these two.
So I think, as it relates to class size, so you have your enrollment for your courses and the kids build their schedule and they work with guidance counselors. So if it shakes out, I guess my question would be, do you have a policy for class size that if you don't have X number of kids in a class that you wouldn't offer that class, that section in that year perhaps? So do you have a policy regarding that? I also think that it speaks to what type of public education we're offering as opposed to sort of the required courses and what you have in the above required. And I think there's tiers to that on where you are as far as a public school is concerned. So I think we've heard before, I'll just say St. John's Prep, I think that we had a parent come and say, well, my kid goes to prep and, if we have to sign a contract that says if there are not 10 students in that class, that the class won't be held and where, you don't get to, put pressure on the administration to offer it because you have 9 students. So I think, depth and breadth of availability of courses also translates into dollars.
I think one of the questions we have is, we have some concerns over the large number of school choice students and the fact that the district's only receiving 5,000 per student, and wondering what it would look like without those school choice. Because if you've got 100 school choice, it seems like if you didn't have them, you might be able to have fewer teachers. That's kind of what we're wondering.
And I think I'll piggyback on that because I think one of the things that Ben had said at our last numbers crunching meeting was that Essex would prefer that the district not take 20 additional school choice kids this year. And I think it was interpreted that he didn't want the district to use the 100,000 as the revenue. But in turn, I think that Ben really was speaking to why are we adding to school choice students when we have the pressure of school choice and Memorial forcing a third teacher at a grade level. So you end up, needing to reallocate resources or hire an additional teacher. And I think you could take that further. Or, are we taking school choice kids and then we're creating a bubble? And if they could be reallocated elsewhere, if there's room, then that would make good financial sense. It may not, there may be a counterpoint to that, but I think that's what he was looking for at that point. And I think you ended up adding the 20, right? Or offering the 20.
Well,
But yeah,
Okay.
a lower number.
Just, so just the siblings, is that how you ended up? Yeah.
So I'll share, one of my questions is, can we do something about healthcare? That's such an issue. And, can we get that down? And I don't know if I know there's been talk of, either changing providers or going to the state, are there town school opportunities or, opportunities within the school budget itself, that we can look into. So to me, that was one of the drivers this year and obviously something we need to look at carefully.
When is the teacher's contract? Did it renew?
27.
And how early, I think, how early can you start looking at that? I know, you talked about it a little bit, that you need to put out an RFP. And if the school committee is willing to look at any impact bargaining on that, if we end up in this, horrible territory again where, you're at 27 or 23 or whatever the number is, I think, was your driving factor this year.
But with healthcare, if you were to go out and find something cheaper, couldn't you do a special contract at,
Impact bargain.
okay.
Do we want to answer questions now?
No, I'm just, I
Yeah, I
just thought you could, I just wanted to make sure this wasn't something where you have to wait till the end of the contract. If,
No, we can change providers
okay,
without the contract, but we can't change conditions of the plan.
Okay.
Without engaging them in conversation and getting them to agree to it. And we are going to look at broker as well as provider to see if, there's a better broker out there for us.
as we know, we all would rather be putting money into the students versus the.
Yep.
But we also know healthcare is very expensive. So I guess, for me, I have heard the concerns of, parents and grandparents regarding the equity of feeling that what education Essex is getting is not there. And I don't think just throwing more money on something, I think we have to figure out, well, why and how. And having been on the school committee back in 2017, we were already in our second year of seeing numbers dropping. Here it is 2025, and I'm concerned I'm still hearing that.
Have you developed your, meeting schedule for next year?
For school committee
Yes.
meetings? For the full group, yes. We have not. Oh,
Excellent.
we actually have set a time for like finance subcommittee and
Yeah,
stuff,
they're
right?
out.
Are they on the website? And
Not yet.
not yet. Okay.
We're switching over, so our website's going to be a little clunky for the month of July.
Could you just forward that to me if you would?
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's probably been posted.
This is a bit of an open question here, but what kind of work do we need to do or questions do we need to ask to get a sense of, a little bit to Greg's point, an override strategy, right? I mean, the budget we just passed, we are still committing, significant reserves from the school side. If we assume that we don't do that again because they were running low and we can't commit that amount again, how do we work through the implications of that number for potential override triggers? I'm trying to figure, I don't even know how to ask the question, right? How do we think through the implications of that in terms of requests for overrides that we're not doing it yearly? What do we consider a correct, quote unquote, correction that gets us 5 years out? Or do we bank some capacity? Do we do the strategy? I guess it's a strategy question more than a planning question, maybe, but thoughts?
Well, I think that Manchester's strategy regarding our tax rate is to tax taxpayers for current expenses and not squirrel away money in reserves and not, so that's the money. We spend our reserves down 8%. We tend to keep them that way, and we do not have other reserve accounts other than an apparatus fund, the 350,000. And I don't see us changing that. My understanding is Essex has a different strategy that, if I read the finance committee report correctly, he got lots of money in reserves of various accounts.
But we also talked, maybe our last meeting or something, just about not banking the reserves themselves, but banking the capacity to tax, right? I don't have the language in front of me, but, you all have the
It's just a bigger past.
yeah.
So that's a logistics question, right? Because we had this discussion, Brendan and I had this discussion, because I was very unclear about the logistics of doing a multi-year override and banking excess capacity, because it is our understanding that when you, and Manchester doesn't want to do this, and I don't think Essex does either, artificially inflates the tax rate for the future and holds it aside, that it isn't guaranteed to actually go to the school.
Year one of an override is the only time it has to go to
Guaranteed.
the purpose that has been laid down. Subsequent years, it's just part of your ability to levy tax for any lawful purpose. And there's a voter trust issue there possibly, right? Okay, we're gonna take in 3 years worth of what we think the school is going to need from the Essex apportionment. There might be voters who say, we don't know that that's actually going to happen. It could go into something completely different. So it is difficult, I think, from a number of vantage points to say that you're gonna bring in more than what you actually need in a fiscal year. I'm not saying it can't be done, although in the first year, if you're raising money for an override for a specific purpose, I'm not sure how you say that you spent it on that purpose if you don't use all of it. And I'm not so sure that anyone's really done that. Greg, do you?
Yeah, I'm not aware.
I don't know of anyone that's ever done that. And then, because there are a variety of reasons why you might not do that.
But I think if you wanted to raise more money in a given year than you anticipate spending, you have to designate it towards a capital reserve or some sort of reserve. It's got to go to some
It
bucket.
just can't be, now we have extra capacity.
Right. You can't just overtax the.
There are technical reasons why you can't just do that.
How did Manchester happen to have excess? City?
We did a 0 tax rate increase the first year of COVID, a 1.5% tax rate increase the next year, and plus our growth estimates were low, so that automatically adds to excess levy capacity. So we've been under taxed
Under 2.5.
for 3 or 4 years, well, 3 years, I think.
And that's how Essex did it in 2016. We joined the regional dispatch, saved $300,000 a year. We settled the Canoma Point leases, started making, it's now almost $650, but around $500,000 a year of non-tax income. And we had also budgeted conservatively, we don't count on new growth, and we ended up with capacity. We put that all together in 2016. We were in a situation where Manchester was this.
We also used our reserves. We were up to 16% in reserves.
Mhm.
So we've been using those for our capital. So we don't use it for operating.
Essex does have a fair amount of money set aside, but it was done so very intentionally. So when, like, we need to restain this building, or when the public safety building has it, we're building that for the future now, so we don't have to go and do a capital exclusion or a debt exclusion in the future to deal with things that we could be planning for now, and we are. So there was that whole discussion of just how much money I put aside. I did a whole chart on it, sent it to anyone who wanted to see it. And some of the things we can't get at anyway. For instance, the Canoma Point Sale and Real Estate Fund. That can only be used for capital purchases. It cannot be used for operations. And there's a significant amount of money in there. We're not going to touch our OPEB fund, right? There's a significant amount of money in there. But that's being put away for a goal that we all need to reach, every community.
CPA.
See, if you start looking at some of the major numbers on that list, you're going to see that there was intentionality and we're hitting on things that any municipality needs to think about. It's not just put away generally. We do have a general stabilization fund of about $1 million. And that's a rainy day fund. That's, what do you do if there's a real problem that's unanticipated? We haven't spent out of the stabilization fund. I don't know if ever, right? I know, I can tell you it hasn't been touched in the 28 years I've been with this town. And it's by design. It's for something that you're really gonna deal with, and there's no other way.
Can I just check, Pam, are we still on? It's just
It's
the
the
projector.
HDMI that just
Okay.
Okay, let me see if I can.
blinking.
No, that's okay. We can actually probably turn it off here as long as we're still on. We aren't.
Yeah, if we're not showing anything, but I can get it back, Pam. I think it's just a wire underneath.
Okay, as long as we're still on, we're good.
So I just said, so Brendan, in terms of OPEB, do you have a target year for the full funding?
We do, but our input to the OPEB varies depending on what we have available in free cash, because we generally put money in the fall.
Yeah.
And if we have a major thing, like we bought a new ladder truck, guess what? OPEB, so I don't think there's a lot of confidence in reaching a particular date. It's just, we do as much as we can, whenever we can. And, you know, I think, our target is around 3 million. And I don't have the exact figure in front of me, but that was actually on that printout that I did for everyone. But again, we're not gonna, you know, people say, well, you have all this money. No, we're not gonna touch the OPEB fund to pay for something else. Whether it's the school apportionment or a fire truck, or first of all, in some cases, you couldn't even do that. Without, I guess, going to town meeting for some kind of vote that would allow you to back that money out. But it's engaged for a purpose, and, you know, our reserve fund is, our stabilization fund is $1 million, that's where it should be, that's your 5%. And our, OPEB is making progress, and that needs to be in place. I don't see that there's any type of additional money, free cash we use for one-time expenses, just like you do. And that usually comes in around 1.2 million. So to those who think that there's money, yes, in the aggregate, it adds up to a fair sum, 7.5 million, something like that. Start breaking it down, and if anyone wants to see the chart I did, I'll be happy to send it to you.
So I think part of what we can work towards, you know, as we get into next school year is, you know, understanding that, you know, in this context, so we can kind of see how that plays out. I think that'll be helpful.
Yeah, if you want, I'll spend that around. I did it just prior to the annual town meeting, because a lot of people had a lot of interest in it.
Yeah, good.
So I'll send that around.
I don't think this is one of my thoughts. I don't think it's a priority, but I think it's an opportunity. You know, as we have these discussions, to be thinking about which kind of fiscal issues we might look to advocate state or outside our communities. For example, like regional transportation or something like that. I know, you know, if there are things that come up in our conversation that we think that we, you know, should be speaking to those above us, that, you know, impact state funding or whatnot, it'd be nice to identify that and think about whether or not that's a role that we should recommend to our respective boards. All right, so it feels like the topics and questions are on the table, if you will. So I'm hearing a better understanding of how to operationalize the school program. Kind of a broad question about kind of what is the public obligation or the obligation for public education versus nice to have. I'm hearing a question about impact of school choice, particularly given that we only get $5,000. Considering the pressure on memorial school related to school choice, healthcare, and what can be done about that. And then issues around equity around Essex Elementary in particular. That captured them?
Yeah, I think part of the modeling that we'd like to know about, I think I had asked him this question a couple of years ago when I was in on the finance committee, was where do our teachers fall within the salary schedule and like projected retirement, so that we, you know, and maybe take that into account for your modeling, or maybe it isn't, you know. I'm just going back to the model that we used in the spring, so that you know, have some feeling of what your turnover is looking like, open positions. I know it's a short term that you get a little, you know, savings there for a few years and then it rolls off, but
I guess at some point, we need to consider the roles of the communities and the school district. I think there are areas that really belong to the district.
Can you talk a little bit more about the role of the community too? Because I think part of what you're saying is that there are responsibilities that the school committee has, that select board has, that FinCom has. And we should
Well, I think.
be cognizant of those.
I think in this case, the FinComs and the select board seem to be well aligned in each community. It's a question of to what extent should the community be determining the school program?
The community broadly or the FinCom and select board?
The people in this room.
Okay.
And you say that, but Ann, here's my question. If we were a poor district doing a lousy job at teaching our children, wouldn't the community have a right to say, wait, you're not doing justice? That's, I just want to make sure, because we're a high performing, does that mean that the same types of people who are paying their taxes don't have a right to say, wait, should the program be this robust? I just want to understand that. I understand what you're saying, but it also concerns me that
Those are concerns that the community should be raising with the school committee, not the towns and the finance committee's raising. I mean, we need to support the finance, but I don't feel we're qualified to really have much comment on programming being offered. Our town taxpayers are happy, relatively happy with the level of programming, and they're not going to be if the services decline.
My question is slightly different from that. Just to what extent do the towns need to know the intimate details of the operation of the school?
And for what purpose? And I think that's what you're getting at, right? Is it to understand the financing of the school, or is it to impact what program is offered?
It's hard
To tell?
if you're in that deep, it's hard to tell what you're doing.
Right.
Well, isn't it both? If someone has an opinion that the programming is too robust, that has a financial impact if it were not going to be offered. One does follow from the other. Jake, are you asking about, okay, we don't agree philosophically with what's being taught in the course, because that's what, nobody's getting at that. That is not what is being asked about, to be clear. What's being asked about is how robust is the school program, I talked about it earlier, versus, you know, what a public school has to provide. And how do we get from the general guiding documents of the district to what's actually been laid out for a course schedule? And there are questions out there like, do you offer a particular course every other year? Some districts do that. That's what we're getting
I
at.
think for clarity, we probably want to stop talking about the program because you're really talking about the schedule, credits, and graduation requirements, because this sounds very particular to the high school. Because that's the only.
We don't know. I mean, that's what That's what people are trying to find out.
Because unless you reduce the number of classes that the students take, you're not gonna, it doesn't matter whether it's AP or grade 9 English. That's awful. Because you need to have so many options to fill the 990 hours of the school day as divided by the schedule. So
what
this is good because I'm kind of,
But
I
if you
think we
had,
need to shift
right.
language a little bit. That will help me to.
But just to go on that.
Yes, but I am hearing two things. One is kind of what is our public obligation, right? And Pam, you asked the question earlier, are you asking, what is required of us? I think you answered no before, Brendan, but I think you're actually saying yes. Is our program much beyond what?
Well, no, because I was at what's in the guiding document, which is what we got in the data request versus what is actually being offered. I'm not questioning that, I said this before, I'm not questioning that our district meets the minimum standards for public education. I'm not there. The question is, how do we get more detail between what we were given in the data request and what is actually being offered? So Pam, you laid out, I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
So you said, you have to fill the number of class hours. But if you had 5 kids taking 5 different courses or 25 kids in one course, wouldn't that still fill the hours but represent a potentially different financial cost for the district?
Yeah, so
That's what I'm getting.
why I'm not scheduling is right now, we don't have a class size policy. We do have student choice drive the distribution of the schedule. So you're really looking at scheduling, because the courses that are outlined in the program of study are what we're offering, and then students elect to take them.
That's what we're gonna get at. That's what I think the selectmen and the finance, and I'm speaking for them.
And I would just say to Ann's point, very respectfully, that's not even my charge. That's the principal's charge, is to distribute that schedule, and it would be the school committee's charge.
Right, and that's the exact question. I think we're there. How does the principal or whatever, or whoever's setting it up, determine what you are offering from the general guiding document?
What is
I think what's important about Ann's comment is that we clarify why we're interested in that, right? So it doesn't appear and it isn't interpreted that you're trying to determine the schedule for the school. So I think if you can step back and say, all right, why is it of interest, right? Are there different financial implications for different scheduling approaches, right? And if you're asking what is our current process and its financial implication versus other possibilities?
Why is that all scheduled though? Isn't it the array of things that are offered is an aspect that's separate from schedule? Schedule have to take care of how to get up that array into a class different.
Well, there's the technical schedule and what students need and the differentiated interests of students and their pathways to college, and
Right, and that's,
driven by to what is in the program represents what the school is offering to meet various different needs. So I don't know that this is, we want to go down.
well, no, I'm just,
We don't want to.
I think we just
And
started,
there's a difference between forced scheduling, which is what I would call what we do at the elementary or middle school, which is everyone is just subdivided into 5 sections and you are given a course to take.
right,
As opposed to being able to choose an array of courses based on your interests, your
right,
needs.
and yes, it is certainly more, applicable to the high school. And I think that what the officials in Essex are asking is, how is that array selected from the general to the specific? Because there are other high schools out there that don't have the array of things that Manchester-Essex High School offers, right? So how do
I
you,
think our program is fairly standard and comparable districts.
All right, so before I go any farther down this, and this is what I think we want to be careful of, right? We're not, if I hear you correctly, Brendan, it's not that you're judging the program, but you want to understand the fiscal implications of it. So I think we have to be very careful how we frame that and be clear about framing that. So it's not just about, tell me how the schedule is done.
Well, I think that that's really, I mean, if that's not what was heard, that's what I heard, is understanding where's the money in buckets? If I'm going to do something, I have to look at what money I have, how much is this gonna cost me if I take this option? And it shouldn't matter whether we're talking about my individual finances or school finances, what brings us above and beyond? Because the appetite for an override, and I'm sure that if Manchester had to do an override every year, their town would not also like to have an override every year. Nobody wants to see that it go up that much. There's people that lose their jobs, there's people who, end up being sick, so it puts a burden on townspeople. And having them sell and move out isn't gonna help, because that could just mean that more kids come in. We also have the concern of what's gonna happen with the federal and state fundings that we do have been receiving. Are they gonna continue at the volume they are? Those are kind of concerning to me, that if they don't, now how do we cover these?
That's a conversation I don't even want to enter right now, because it's just pure speculation at this moment, but it's a definite concern, yeah.
So for clarification, program, we mean high school, and by high school, we mean how much are we offering, and is there a way to offer it for less? Or is there a way to offer less but still maintain quality?
Right. Right, because.
And I think that,
Because not all high schools offer all the things. Maybe there are high schools that offer more than this district does. Maybe there are high schools that offer less than this district does. But how do you get to what this district does from the guiding documents to the choices that have been made as to what to offer? That's what we're still asking. That's the question.
Okay. And I do think, Anne, your comment is in essence a norm and expectation that we should all remind each other of. Is kind of, we are on different boards and which have different responsibilities, and we just don't want to push people to think we're overstepping our roles. But it is important to ask the question, because it does have implications for each other's work. So thank you for that.
And I think the continued conversation is, in Essex, I'm just looking at actual numbers in Essex. So FY '22, we're at $8.364 million. FY '26, we're going to be at 10,776. But the student population has declined dramatically, but the head count for teachers, whether they're reallocated or whatnot, has not. And it was one of the when we had this discussion at Finance Committee about the information you provided. My newest member said, well, the only thing that really stuck out to me is that, in 2015, and I don't know the exact year, there were about 200 teachers and there were this many students. And in 2025, there are this many students and this many teachers, and that they're about the same. So that is what begs the question. It's a data driver that, our budget is escalating and our population is aging. And this year we hit that 38% mark for over 60. So, our taxpayers have questions. So we, clearly, we're on the heavy end of apportionment. We've been there for several years. We have no excess capacity, and Manchester's been on the light end of apportionment, which also helps for excess capacity on their side.
I think we need to be careful about talking about apportionment, because you have to remember we pay 5,000 more per student than Essex does. So our per student cost is significantly more. So just to say we're light on apportionment, I don't think that's fair.
But you get that way through equalized valuation. Anne's going to speak to this because she's the guru of.
I'm not going to speak to that here. I will say in general that I think the apportionment formula disfavors Essex. And the comparison, having said I wasn't going to say it, I won't say it. There are essentially two ways of funding schools in the abstract. There's the public school method where you take it out of the taxpayers based on the value of their property. And there's the private school where there's a fee for pupil. And a district should balance those. In Manchester, for example, a taxpayer on Boardman Avenue pays a lot more per student than a taxpayer on Desmond Ave. So this is a long-term question, but I think we need to think about that. Should we have something that's closer to, we are a single town? Or should we have something that says, okay, you send this many students, we send that many students, and we divide them.
So you're saying, do you pay per head count of every available school age child, whether they go or not?
No, I'm saying
Based on the,
based on,
Still not based on enrollment.
I don't see why the school should be paying for school, kids that aren't going. But
And again, that reflects on an ability to pay for private school and as
but more
well.
than the ability to pay, it's also on the program being offered.
Right.
That if they perceive it as not robust enough, then they're gonna go to private schools.
But so those.
and that's a
people-
good thing, frankly, because it cuts down on the head count. And those people still pay taxes.
Until something happens, like 2008, and they all come back. And, so. So you said, if we were a single town, wouldn't we be building a school program for the whole town, meaning those people in the other, those sections of town that are the lower income versus the upper income, they still have to do the same thing. You don't do a program based on only the one neighborhood that could send their kids off to private school, but choose not to. You send it to the whole, you look at the balance of what the whole town is. Is that, I mean, I grew up in a town that had many areas.
Two follow-up questions, and, go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, just to speak, it's more about a single town model as a single tax rate. Right, as a single.
Right.
And it depends on the value of the property. Whereas that, you have two different rates, so that you can't compare a $7,000 house or $7,000 house. There's not apples to apples.
Correct.
So,
Less about the tax rate and more just trying to figure out how we can break through the questions that still remain from year to year. So the program, the high school program in concept to realization and the staffing concepts that you want to understand, there's not a report that's going over that. So that, I don't see that as a data request. I see that as a workshop where we can help you understand the processes that we follow. Because if you look at the data on something like staffing, the heads are the same, but the distribution of those staffing heads have shifted tremendously to special education. Where there's been relatively a constant, I think a little bit of a fluctuation in regular ed. So I don't know that we're going to produce a document that helps you understand, because the documents we have are what we have provided you.
Right, no, we understand that.
And then,
It's just, we just don't understand how it plays out from there.
and the other follow-up question I had is, can you give me 2 or 3 programs, like you've cited other schools that offer less or offer it differently? If we could see those, we might be able to understand what you're seeing and see how we can try to explain how it's different, why it's different. Or that might shed some light on what you're envisioning could be. And the only other note, Howard had, and I can dig up my notes on it, is my understanding of our private school numbers is it's fairly constant in Manchester. We do have little blips from year to year in terms of the 9th grade exit, but over time, it remains relatively constant. And where we have seen a spike was from Essex. Or Essex residents.
Going rather.
I mean, we're not talking huge numbers, but when we looked at the report that came out from the state this year, that's where I think we identified a little bit of a trickle, a bump.
I've always said historically, it's sort of hovered between 11% and 13%.
at the younger grades, so we have a contingent that never comes to public school. And then we see our growth rate, typically 8th to 9th is a big year where people choose to leave. We also get some kids back from K-8 programs, so. But that's where we see it bump into the 20s. For high school, secondary.
All right, so it's feeling to me like we have the issues on the table. Some of them are big, that we're not gonna necessarily answer, in this next year, but may be able to inform conversations about them, such as apportionment or anything, that might trickle up from that. But in terms of, understanding the budgets and the finances, setting ourselves up to, work through what the implications are for the town and how it might play out in terms of Essex Elementary and potential triggering of overrides. It sounds like we have the issues on the table and some priorities, and started to identify some action steps on the school committee side. Brendan's going to share what you
The
have,
town's reserve.
sometime reserve summary. And then we'll plan to come early in the year to start looking at town and school finances. Obviously, none of us have our budgets in any shape to make decisions, but we can at least continue the process of understanding each other's financial approach and situation and potential implications of, and to the extent we can model those, we can certainly work that through, but recognizing that models are always rough guesstimates at the moment in time we are looking at them. All right, I don't anticipate us meeting through the summer. It was hard enough to get this one together before everybody disappeared for the summer. But I would like, I don't think we have to settle it at all, but to be prepared to meet, relatively early, probably early September-ish or so. Let everything get up and running in late August and then be ready to convene in September.
I do have one more question.
Please.
Can we walk away with clarity around the leases question and what the ask is from the municipal attorney on a legal opinion? I just don't feel like I have a handle on that.
Well, from Essex just raised a question because we just wanted to have a copy of what's currently in place. As of now, there isn't.
I'm sorry.
As of now, there isn't a lease in place.
Yes,
For Manchester buildings?
yes, we got the copy that Pam signed the other day.
I don't know if it ever came through, because weren't you asking about whether it should be changed?
I thought I sent one that said I dated it the date.
Right.
No, I'm saying, did we get a copy of it? I don't think
Did I not
so.
send it?
I hope so, but I'll.
I don't think, that's why I asked, because I didn't know what the resolution was.
The email I saw had 20 and 21, not.
Right, so
That's what I.
the reason I asked the question, Greg,
No, you signed with the one that went to 31.
Okay.
the reason I asked the question is after we had the discussion, I don't think Essex ever saw a copy of what had been decided. You and I talked,
So nothing changed. It kept the original one.
right, okay, so it's not still an open question. There is a lease signed and we're gonna get a copy of it?
That's why I'm asking. I'm really lost. Yeah.
Okay, so the request is everybody share their signed leases.
What is this, that there is a lease that was recently signed?
So there was some glitches back a few years ago where it never got fully signed. Both towns signed it, it didn't have Pam's signature on it. I think it fell through the cracks on the mile. It's in transition, and I don't think it ever got. So, but we did have the version that the unit board signed and Manchester board signed. I sent it to Pam and said, this is what everyone had agreed on.
Right, we have one that's countersigned by Pam, the Essex District lease.
Right.
we were just waiting to see we had somebody come to a selectmen's meeting, I told you all.
Right.
Resident saying, I want a copy of it. Yeah,
Understood.
So the request is just follow up with a copy of the
a
sign.
copy of the sign list.
Okay.
That's what we're looking for.
Right, and again, my understanding was that it replicated and did not change any of the original lease language, except the dates. So the original lease language talked about the ability, as you call it, the ability for the district to alter schools, to tear them down and reconstruct. And it has that authority, and that's in the lease. And then it says if the district ever dissolves, those buildings revert back to the municipalities. That's what the current language is all about. And if we paid for 2/3 of yours, we paid for 1/3 of ours, I think the numbers worked out. Not in terms of equity.
Yeah, I mean, we raised the evolution in 2020. We really couldn't, arrive at something different, so we resumed the leases. And I believe that obviously your Board of Selectmen voted to resume the lease. It's just something where it never got signed never got countersigned by the district.
So what we circulated this last week is the countersign, or the original document just rolls forward? The base.
It was just the amended lease that referenced, that gives the new dates to 31 and references that the old lease is in effect. Sorry, if I had my phone, I could have brought this.
That's a good one. But this is something the three of you can also follow up with, is make sure the loops are closed. Yeah.
For a period of 20 years from July.
All right, so any,
Well, I think, we'll push back, Jane. We need to set, while we're all sitting here, because I feel like we go back and then it circulates around and we.
No, I
don't-
agree, but I'm glad you raised it.
I just want to say, this is not a finance subcommittee topic. It sounds more like the three of you should just make sure the loops are closed here. If there is something that needs to come back to boards, then surely bring it back to boards, but this sounds like business that,
So what we signed and circulated is what is the latest and what needs to be done for the,
That's my understanding. And we'll
There
make sure
just
that-
wasn't
we'll
one.
make sure
All
that
right,
we have a copy.
so the three of you confer before you walk out
Right,
the
we
room.
never got a copy of it after our most recent discussion came.
so what I sent on 6/11/25 is not the most current.
No, that is.
Lease extension MVP.
Okay, I'm gonna
We can talk,
bring
we can talk
this
about
to,
it with Dan.
yeah, I'm gonna bring this to a close. You all can follow up on this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll look at my email. Right?
Any pressing comments before we close?
I would very much like to have the workshop that Ben suggested, so that we understand how the high school, schedule and offerings are.
Great,
So if we could do that for our first meeting.
okay, early in the process. Yep. Great. Thank you for that suggestion.
Going to go back to the lease again. Is there something attached to this that impacts the building project, which impacts the finances, which impacts the work that we're doing?
It was a side discussion about
Okay.
getting, as I mentioned, we had somebody from the public ask us for
I
it.
get it. I get it.
That's all.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay,
so
all right, thank you all for joining. We will be in touch late in the summer to schedule a early fall meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing up.
Yes.
My next appointment will be. The doctor will be very happy.